Good evening, I'm John Fugelsang. We are leading off the show tonight with some breaking news about a hostage rescue mission in Algeria where civilians, including possibly some Americans, have reportedly been killed. And then we're going to turn to what many feel is a broken American policy that may have killed more than 1,000 civilians in 4 countries, including close to 200 children. But for now, let's start with Algeria. Algerian troops attacked a remote gas complex near the Libyan border today in hopes of freeing dozens of foreign and Algerian hostages seized there by extremists linked to al-Qaeda in a mass kidnapping attempt this past Wednesday. Now, if you haven't heard too much about this on the news, it might be because it doesn't involve fake girlfriends or blood doping. But Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta said about 100 people were at the complex when the attempted kidnapping took place, and that as many as 8 Americans may have been present. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton told reporters that U.S. counterterrorism officials have been in close touch with their Algerian counterparts, but the situation remains fluid.
The security of our Americans who are held hostage is our highest priority, but of course we care deeply about the other Algerian and foreign hostages as well. And because of the fluidity and the fact that there is a lot of planning going on, I cannot give you any further details at this time about the current situation on the ground.
According to the BBC, 5 American hostages survived the assault and have already left Algeria, and that 1 Irish hostage was also freed, along with other foreigners and as many as 600 Algerians. Now, other hostages are apparently still being held. As for casualties, Algeria's news agency reports that many kidnappers and at least 4 hostages were killed, and that efforts are underway to free others who are still being held. A spokesman for the extremists claims at least 35 hostages and 15 kidnappers died in today's assault. Now, a surveillance drone is said to be providing real-time pictures of the scene for American policymakers, but it is the covert drone war conducted by our CIA, principally in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Somalia, that will be our focus in a few moments. Filmmaker and activist Robert Greenwald is back from Pakistan, where he tried to determine if strikes which Washington says are strictly targeted on terrorists are making the U.S. any safer, or rather creating a new generation of anti-American militants. Now, according to Pakistani Foreign Minister Hina Rabinikar, the strikes are making things definitely worse.
You're creating 1,000 more minds and people who will go in the ranks of the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban because they feel that when civilians die and when illegal activity happens in another territory, it's a hostile one, and it is something which has reaction.
We will have more on the drone warfare in a moment. First, for the latest on the Algerian hostage crisis, we're joined by Carlo Munoz, staff writer for Defense and National Security with The Hill, who has been following the story. Carlo, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you. So what is the latest? Algerian officials say the assault is over, but apparently some prisoners are still, in fact, being held.
That's sort of where the situation stands right now. As you mentioned earlier, Algerian Special Forces did complete that raid on the BP-owned facility in the country. As far as numbers regarding the hostages that are still at the facility, it's just as murky as the numbers coming out as far as who were killed and who escaped. So some reports have said as many as 2 Americans are still on the facility under lock and key by the militants who are there. But again, reports vary.
Are we to assume then that these are BP employees or contractors who are being held?
More than likely. It was again, as you mentioned, a BP-owned facility, so they were more than likely B employees, Algerian, and also from other countries as well. So,
Carlo, the group behind the kidnapping calls itself the Masked Brigade. What do we know about them, and are they, as rumored to be, a new strain of al-Qaeda?
Well, as far as being a new strain of al-Qaeda, I'm not quite sure. They seem to fall in line with many of the al-Qaeda affiliated groups in the country. Obviously, the terrorist organization does have its main terror cell, if you will, known as al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb. But you also have affiliated cells such as Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab in Somalia. So this group seems to fall along those lines. Recent reports noted that the head of this particular group had actually had experience fighting in Afghanistan before going back to Africa to sort of take up the cause there.
So does it seem like North Africa is now becoming ground zero for new al-Qaeda recruitment?
Well, as far as it becoming ground zero for al-Qaeda recruitment, the area of North Africa and the continent on the whole has sort of been a concern for the Defense Department for a while now. The Defense Department has created in recent years the Africa Command, and also a Joint Special Operations Task Force was deployed to the Trans-Sahara region of the country in early 2000, and it was part of the previous Bush administration's global war on terror. So the White House and the Pentagon have always had their eye on that area in terms of, possibly becoming a safe haven for al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda affiliated groups. But I think the number of incidents that have happened in the recent weeks have sort of drawn most people's attention to it now.
I thank you very much. National Defense and National Security Staff Writer for The Hill, Carlo Munoz. I hope you'll come back to keep us updated on this development.
All right, will do. Thanks.
Thank you so much. From the hostage crisis in Algeria to the covert American drone war, I'm pleased to be joined by filmmaker and activist Robert Greenwald, just back from Pakistan, where he interviewed drone attack survivors for his upcoming documentary, Drones Exposed. Mr. Greenwald, good evening, and thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Before we begin talking about drone warfare and your upcoming film, I just want to ask if you see any connection between the drone war against al-Qaeda and this kidnapping attempt by an al-Qaeda-linked group in North Africa.
Well, unlike other folks in this realm, I like to stick with the facts. And we don't have any factual information about that particular attack and what caused and motivated. But what we do have facts about is that the drones are alienating, creating enemies, and serving as recruiting tools for al-Qaeda and Taliban all over the world. And there's data about that, there's information about that. So I'm sure one day we will know specifically about this incident and whether it was related to a drone attack. Again, remember that the Times Square bomber was there because of drones. So it's having a widespread and continuing impact in ways that is going to come back to haunt us for years and years and years.
It does seem like a form of instant blowback, that the more we try to take out America haters, the more new America haters we create. How long were you in Pakistan, and what areas did you visit?
When I was in Pakistan, I was in Islamabad. Unfortunately, the security is such that I wasn't able to go out into the so-called tribal areas where the drone attacks are. But working with some amazing men and women in Pakistan, they brought to Islamabad maybe 20, 25, 30 people that I interviewed. And there were family members, fathers, children who had lost friends or relatives to drone attacks, and they pleaded with me literally at the end of every interview. They would turn to me and say, could you please tell Mr. Obama we are not terrorists and to stop killing our people? As if I could walk into his office and talk to him. But over the time that I was in Pakistan, and I talked to politicians, I talked to a psychiatrist who runs a hospital where he tells stories of people literally having to travel 8 hours to get any kind of mental health because of the drone attacks. And there's a wide variety of people, all of whom were unanimous in the fact that the drones are making the United States of America less safe because of the number of enemies we were creating.
I gotta say, in the footage we just showed from you making the film, you are being greeted warmly, and it's worth remembering that Pakistan is still officially a U.S. ally. Is there still a warmth among the people there towards our country, or are you disturbed by a growing hostility by the Pakistani people?
Well, the people I met with, and again, one doesn't want to overgeneralize, but the people I met with in the investigation work for the film could not have been more gracious. These were people, a man held up a picture of his 65, 70-year-old mother, and he said, look, she was killed by a drone. She's not a terrorist. He and his children, her grandchildren, couldn't have been friendlier, couldn't have been more helpful. and wanted to get the word to the United States that they were not doing anything to justify our assassinating them and their relatives. So they seem to be able to separate, at this point, the United States policy from members and people of the United States of America. But as Imran Khan said to me, who's a presidential candidate of Pakistan, he said, yeah, there are some, let's say, 100 fanatics in this tribal area. You now have 1 million people who hate you because you're murdering their relatives. And think about that for a minute. Just think about that. And think about, we did a separate video on this, which is on our website, 178 children have been killed by drones in Pakistan and Yemen.
Well, John Brennan, who's been in charge of President Obama's drone war, says that the drone strikes have been executed with surgical precision. Does that jibe with what you found on the ground?
No, that's a disgusting statement. They've not been executed with surgical precision, although maybe a terrible hack surgeon, if that's your definition. But there are numerous people, numerous incidents of absolutely outrageous civilian casualties. And the other thing that we must understand is, even if the drones are technically accurate, and there may be some question about that, how are they getting the information as to who to attack with drones? Well, their ex-Pakistani military are bribing people in the provinces to give them names, and that's how and who the drones are being directed at. And just like in Guantanamo, people are turning in folks who they have grudges with or who they're enemies. So we really must think about that. These incredible instruments flying from the sky, attacking and killing, are based on a neighbor turning in someone in another village because they have a grudge.
And sadly, bribes leading to bad intel are all too familiar in this long and destructive conflict. We've only got about 20 seconds left. Do you think, sir, that whether we like it or not, drone warfare is the future of American military deployment?
Well, I think we have to do everything in our power to stop it, for all the obvious reasons, morally, spiritually, and it's not making us safer. And as Americans understand that, as policymakers understand that, as we get the word out, I hope that the policy will be changed.
Really quick, 5 seconds, but the argument that it keeps troops out of harm's way, does that persuade you?
We're not at war with Pakistan. Pakistan is a country we're not at war at. So it's not either troops or drones. It's how do you protect and defend, and drones are not doing the job.
Filmmaker, activist Robert Greenwald is a big fan of your films. Many thanks for some of your time tonight. One of our heroes, Alan Grayson. He's back in Congress, and he's joining us next.